Hey, everybody. JJ Cooper, Geoff Pontes, another Baseball America prospect podcast. And I'm going to start with an apology. We started with the AL East last week, said we're going to do one division a week, but we're going to have to put a pause on that. And we're going to have to put a pause on that because we just have too much stuff to cover this week. The future game rosters are out. Geoff and I are both getting ready to head down to Atlanta for that. And as you're watching this, we have a new top 100 prospects update, a significant update at Baseball America. We have to talk about that. You'd be angry at us if we said, no, we can't talk about that. We don't have time. We got to cover the NL East this week. So I promise we'll do the East, we'll do the Centrals, we'll do the West. It's coming, but we've got to jump in on this first. Geoff, great to see you as always. It does feel like this is the time of year that we are basically flying down the freeway and we're trying to grab, stuff as it's flying by at 100 miles an hour maybe. But how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Obviously, it's the calm before the storm a little bit this week with, the holiday coming up. We're plugging away and working on a ton of stuff. But I also know once we get down to Atlanta, then it's kind of off to the races just in terms of, the busiest kind of 2 weeks, at least in season of the year where we're handling draft stuff day of, sort of all the catch up that happens in terms of some extra reports that we do always need to add every year, regardless of how great of a job Carlos and Peter and our draft team does. And then getting those guys onto top 30s, followed by the trade deadline, all the work we have to do. And we haven't seen a lot of movement as of yet, not a lot of action at this point as we're sort of entering the beginning of July, but that could change over the next couple of weeks as more trades start to happen. And then, the deadline the last couple of years, though not a lot of big name prospects got moved last year, there was a flurry of activity in trades. It seemed like over a 24-hour period where 90% of the movement and player acquisitions that happened over this period of like the mid-season or the All-Star break seemed to happen at the trade deadline. So it keeps us extra busy, but at the same time, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's a lot of fun and a high point in the season for our sport.
Yeah, it's you said calm, and I know I kind of raised an eyebrow because this does not feel calm because we're racing like every night. There's always like, okay, can I write some draft reports before I go to bed? We're doing we just finished the work on doing a big top 100 prospects update. We have top 30 update coming that we're working on right now. And it does feel, as crazy as it is, All-Star week. And by the way, let's just say thank you, Baseball America subscribers. Please understand, this is no complaining from us because this is why we do what we do, right? Like the day that I'm like, oh no, I have to cover the futures game and the draft and the home run derby and the All-Star game. Oh no, I resign. The day that that's not fun for me, I should step down because then it should be left to someone who actually enjoys it. Geoff enjoys it. I enjoy it. We love this time of year. It is just a lot of work. But with that, we have our first step, which is the futures game rosters were announced. As always, you're not going to get everyone. You never get everyone. But we're getting a lot of what you want to see. These rosters came out, and I would say there are years like, well, we'll start with this. Geoff and I have talked about this. Like, Geoff, I do feel like overall, if you said, what is the state of prospectum right now? Feels pretty strong. Is that me, or do you feel that way too?
Yeah, no, I do feel that way. Especially the top of the list is really exciting. I think, we'll see with the back end of the top 100 that, we were just put together and we'll talk about more. There's kind of that lull of like, we've graduated some players. There's some other guys that, the sun is sort of setting on their prospect status. And, at this point, they're not really moving anywhere. And we're waiting for that backfill of the draft. Even if it's not a super strong draft, there's still going to be at least 6 or 7 sort of exciting players that can move up.
I'll say we'll have at least 10 will join the 100, be my guess.
Yeah, probably. But I'm saying staying power, we'll see. Could be some guys at the back end of that slide off, others slide on over the course of the next year. but at least, some exciting players will be coming onto the list as well. So I feel like we're in a better spot than we were last year, where it felt like we were very much in this transition window of the draftees from a very strong class. And then you looked at some of the players that were at the complex level that made those sort of level ups this year. We were kind of at a point where we're like, oh, this list seems kind of weak, but it felt like there was the sneaking undercurrent of talented players sort of beneath the waves at that point. So that's kind of risen to sea level. And we've seen that with all the shortstops and some of the other prospects we'll talk about. But the futures game rosters for me, the American League roster is fine. There are plenty of talented players that I want to see.
Oops.
I don't know about
Let me have the right one. Here's the American League. We're going to start with the American League there.
I was going to say, though, my point was the National League roster is outstanding.
And so, okay, when we look at this right now, the thing that does stand out here with the National League roster is, I would say the first thing that really does jump out is the infield and those shortstops, right? We have Jesus Mate, we have JJ Weatherholt, we have Leo DeVries, we have Konnor Griffin. Yes, those are some of the top prospects in the game right there. And oh yeah, by the way, in the outfield, like if you just said, hey, we're just going to focus on the Dodgers outfielders, I would be pretty happy right there, because we got Josue Tapala and we got Sahir Hope. What jumps out to you, though, overall about this?
I think it's like you mentioned, all of the infielders that you kind of wanted to see and have in this game, particularly from the National League side, are here. But you also, it's just a super talented group overall. I like the pitching that we're getting. From what we had seen initially, Chase Burns is going to be on there. Of course, he got called up. He's in the major leagues. He's not going to pitch in the futures game. We see that every year. But you get Tapala, you get Hope. Carson Benj is a guy that, has top 100 type of buzz. He's really performed and hit his way up to AA. And then, you get Andrew Painter, Jackson Wiggins, who's been phenomenal this year.
Travis Sikora.
Yeah, Thomas White, Travis Sikora. There's certainly a few other arms, Hayden, Harris or Marquise Grissom Jr., that like whatever. There's always a few relievers like this every year in the game. But I think overall, you could see a starting nine and a couple innings of starters who all could be playing on this weekend in a few years, potential all-stars. And I think that's the exciting part of it, is there's so many shortstops that the infield is probably going to be potentially all future all-stars for the National League almost all throughout the game.
The other thing I'd add here is that this is one of the best catching groups I think we've had. Yeah. Like there are 3 top 100 catching prospects on this, with Alfredo Duno, who's having a very strong year. Thankfully, been healthy. Injuries have long been kind of the problem for him. Eduardo Tait, hits the ball as hard as about anybody in A ball. And then Joe Mack, who's kind of one of the success stories of a guy who's really kind of come further than almost anyone. I think we both have talked to scouts who said, like, man, there was a time where I almost MP'd this guy, and now here he is. Like, he looks like he could be a big league regular. Again, that's a really good roster there. And then we will talk about the American League side, which, as you said, maybe slightly less, but at the same time, I don't want to, like, when we talk about this infield right here, right? When you talk about, you've got Sebastian Walcott, you've got Kevin McGonigle, you've got Kalen Culpepper, you've got George Lombard Jr., Bryce Matthews, CJ Kafis. That's not like you go, oh, there's just nothing here. There's nothing that we're going to be excited to see. There's a lot here to enjoy too. Here's some of the names that you're most looking forward to seeing on this group.
Yeah, I think number one, leading it off is Gage Jump. I've long been a fan of Gage Jump. He did not pitch in the Cape. I've never seen Gage Jump in person, so I'm excited to see that one. I'm excited to see Jurangelo Shancha. Like, my wife will be joining me down there. I don't know if she's going to the Futures game or not, but If she does attend, that's probably the one prospect she's going to know immediately, because every time he pitches at like 10 o'clock at night, I put it on for at least 3 innings and I go, watch this. Watch him have to declare what side he throws to. So I think that's exciting. Brody Hopkins, he's another one I saw in spring training. I haven't seen him in, a big park like this or in an official game. I've obviously watched him a lot on video over the years. So I'm excited about that. And, I think a lot of these infielders, I've seen a lot of McGonigle, Clark, Lombard over the last couple of years in spring training, but they're all phenomenal hitters and overall players that could make an impact and make a great play on either side of the ball. Any of those guys could make a phenomenal catch. Any of them could, rope a double down the line or homer in this game or steal a couple of bases or just do something exciting. So I think all of those guys in particular, I know I kind of named like all the exciting players in the AL roster, but I'm excited about this pitching staff. And then, that sort of core of exciting hitting prospects they have here. Not as talented as the NL group, but still a pretty good one.
I'll also say, I'm looking forward to, we always love BP at the Futures game. Lazaro Montes being in this, Eduardo Tait, Alfredo Duno. I always want to see guys in BP who just show massive raw power. It's one of the fun things about this event, and we're going to see it again here. The other thing that jumps out with this is I was talking about this with Josh Norris from our staff earlier today. I used to every year, we'd roll out our top 100 and I would explain. I would say, you have to understand, we don't see all these players in person ourselves. This is our reporting. You can't see all these players in person. It's still our reporting. It's still talking to scouts, front office officials, analyzing data, all this. But at the same time, that is something that has changed now. We've seen everyone in our top 100, I think, now. I don't think that there's anyone, partly that is because we've kind of made a concerted effort between the staff, between really hitting spring training, and spring breakout games really do help because we cover almost every spring breakout game. So right there, again, it's 1-2 innings of a pitcher. It's, a couple of at-bats for a hitter, but it does mean right there that we're seeing most top 100 caliber prospects. But then when you throw in between all the traveling we do, we have Josh Norris goes down to the Dominican now and sees the DSL All-Star game. So when we have those players complex leagues and all that, I don't think and the futures game obviously helps as well. We have 30 of our previous top 100. I haven't updated it with our updates here, but it's going to be around that same number. But 30 top 100 prospects here. But Geoff, you said oh, I haven't seen this player in person. It is as someone who's been at BA for longer than I like to admit, it's an amazing stage to be at the point where we say oh, this is a guy. Gage Jump is someone I've never gotten to see in person. It used to be that most of these guys were guys we haven't gotten to see in person. Whereas now it's when we talk about the top 10, most all of them we've all seen in person at some point. Which does help kind of round all this out. I think Josh, when I was talking to Josh, he could come up with 2 players right away, Roki Sasaki, and I think Thomas White, that he had not seen in person. I know you've seen Roki because you've seen Roki at Roki's About Best.
I've seen Thomas White since he was 14.
Right. So right there, okay, I think we're pretty well covered. And again, when we talk about this, that's where we are able to do this at a different level of depth than we used to, which is great because when we talk about Kevin McGonigle, on this, that's a guy that Ben Badler was kind of spotlighting and kind of noticing well before the draft, a couple of years before the draft, I think even we're able to build kind of these long kind of, and that's where the ensemble group works really well as well, which is we're doing this as a team where, okay, Jeff's seen these guys, I've seen these guys, Josh has seen these guys, Carlos, Mark, we have all these people, Jesus, everyone who's seeing different people, and we're able to kind of then try to fuse that all together with all the feedback we get and all. It makes it really fun to get to do what we do. And that leads in the perfect segue because we do have a big top 100 prospects rankings revamp live today at baseballamerica.com. And we'll cover that right after this quick break. And we're back. So, Geoff, this is This is where we try to update our top 100 every month. And I would say, though, that every month has a little different flavor to it, right? The first time we do it in season is kind of the let's be careful here. We don't want to mess anything up. We've just done all our off-season reporting. We don't want to go overboard. We want to adjust for some injuries. Some guys who've really popped might move in, but we're going to be conservative with it. Then we get to that next month. So that's kind of like our April update. In our May update, we're like, okay, injury updates, a little bit more comfort level with guys who really are popping or guys who are really taking a step back. We get to June, and I would say that at June is the first point where we really get a lot of good reporting, like industry feedback kind of drives a lot more of that. But again, it's still like, okay, you're still, the complex leagues are just getting going. There's a lot kind of still, you're just getting out of the cold weather in the Midwest League and the Eastern League and all that. We get to July. And I would say if you wanted to summarize this one, it would be, this is the point in the year where usually we're kind of asking the question, okay, so who's going to be the new number one? And a lot of times the new number one now is someone who, in some cases, it's like, this is our only chance. I think of James Wood, right? This is when James Wood ascended to being our number one prospect. Feel pretty good about that in hindsight. But that's where you had that. Like one year, I think this is where Jackson Holiday, this is where Gunnar Henderson ascended to number one. So this is the point in the year where you've had enough time to kind of, okay, we've gotten the lay of the land. Who's made a step forward? Okay, let's follow up. Let's get more reporting on this player or that player. Roman Anthony remains our number one as you read this, the Red Sox outfielder. But we know he's only going to be on this list for this while longer. So really, the big thing I would say that we did with this one is we said, okay, who's number two? Because number two is going to become our new number one prospect before long. We'll get to the guy who was number two, who's still eligible, not number two anymore, Roki Sasaki. We'll get to that a little later. But as we talked about this, Geoff, it felt like, and we're going to get into kind of the individual cases for a couple of candidates we had, but it really did feel like that this is the year, we've talked about, this is the year of the young shortstop. I felt like all of the candidates we were talking about, almost without fail, there may be one slight exception, but everyone we were talking about who fit into this discussion could be described as a young shortstop, right?
Yeah, so it's a really talented group there at the top. There's 4 or 5 different shortstops. None at the AAA level, none knocking on the door. Probably all at the earliest 2026 ETAs. But all players that maybe have some different profiles, but are considered above average to plus or better offensively, with the ability to stick at shortstop or at least the left side of the infield or a premium position long term.
So I will knock off 2 real quick. We had, like I said, 5 candidates for this. Leo DeVries, we're still getting good feedback. At the same time, remains kind of one of the toughest guys to evaluate because he jumped straight to high A. He's been solid. There's a lot of comfort level with his glove. Want to see more impact, but at the same time, that's understandable considering his age. Sebastian Walcott very much fits into this. Still has one of the highest ceilings of this group, but at the same time, again, is in Double A, which a challenge with this is when you're comparing the guys who are an A ball to Double A. Double A can be the big jump, but he's been, I would say that this hasn't been the year where Sebastian Walcott has so dominated so far where you're like, okay, that's the clear number one, even if he very much tools wise and all fits into that. So that leaves us with 3 that we kind of ended up debating a little bit more. I would say in some ways, Brewers shortstop Jesus Mate kind of, I would say, came into this in pole position out of this group where he was in our previous rankings. With Mate, Geoff, like, what is it that, like, okay, we're going to do a little bit of strengths and weaknesses with every one of these 3. The strengths for Mate and the weaknesses. What is it the case for him of how he could end up being the best prospect in baseball?
Yeah, I think it's just the explosiveness, the fact that there aren't a lot of switch hitters that kind of marry his balance of skills, whether it's plate approach, bat to ball ability, in power projection. I think the angles will come along, particularly as a switch hitter. You have blended sort of numbers. The left-handed swing is a little bit more powerful than the right-handed swing, but you know, fairly good defender in the infield as well. Whether he sticks at shortstop or not, we'll see. But I think at the very least is probably a very good defensive second baseman. So I think you sort of look at those characteristics of the offensive profile, the fact that he is twitchy and young and projectable, and even based on sort of age to level stuff, he is still young for low A. So I think all those things considered, that's what puts Mate into this group. And he's had some struggles. It hasn't been Jackson Churio in low A, which I think some of us kind of hoped for, but that's probably an unreasonable expectation.
Right, when you say he struggled, like he is hitting 283, 394, 21 in a pretty
Mhm.
offensive limited league.
Sure.
The other thing I will note with that is like you said, he was early in the year mainly shortstop, playing a little bit of third base as well. This past month in June, it kind of switched to more of being a second baseman shortstop and really not playing a whole lot of third base. Kind of interesting to see this. Like, this is a team that also has Luis Pena, who also is an elite level prospect, shortstop, middle infielder, who can play multiple positions as well. So they're doing a little bit of a job share there. But Bade, if he came in the pole position, the more we started talking about it, the more we talked about Kevin McGonigle, who keeps climbing up this list, keeps climbing up these rankings. But Geoff, like with McGonigle, we ended up kind of feeling like there's a little bit more of a case for McGonigle to be number 2 or the next number 1. He's at high A. He missed some time early this year, had a minor injury. When he's come back, though, to West Michigan, which is not an easy place to hit, even if it has warmed up, but not an easy place to hit, it really does seem like that he's almost toying with pitchers in that league. But so what's the case for? And if there are any concerns with McGonigle, what would those be?
Yeah, I think the case for is you just sort of look at the hit tool, and I think it's a pretty easy 7 is the way it looks right now. And it's not just, bat to ball ability and the fact that he doesn't swing and miss. And it's not just the fact that his swing decisions are excellent. Um, and, he balances passivity and aggression as well as just about any prospect. It's the fact that he catches flush barrels. So the quality of contact is there as well. And I think sometimes when we start to get really granular on hit tools, there are some elements of power that bleed into the hit tool, in my opinion, and barrel control. And it's kind of where the power starts from, and how there's certain hitters that maybe don't put up the 108, 109 EVs, but hit a lot of home runs because of their barrel control and ability to just catch clean, flush barrels consistently. He's one of those guys. He just has special hands. And I think beyond that, he's explosive in like his own way, that he's not going to be this crazy athletic tester, but in the moment and in game action, there's just the motor is an 80. He's just go, go, go all the time. His baseball IQ is off the charts. And so it's some of that stuff that really doesn't necessarily have a grade or show up in a stat line. But I think when you watch McGonigle at bats, you watch him in the field, just even in between innings, just all the things that he does, he's just very honed in, locked in. He pays attention to all the little parts of the game. You're not going to have, I watched it again last night and he's in his 30s. You're not going to have a Manny Machado, he hits a barrel to the outfield and it hits off the wall for a double that he thinks has gone off the bat and he admires it. McGonigle's probably going to be halfway to second base. Like, he's that kind of guy. And you'll get better run times from him, like home to first, I think sometimes, than you expect, or he'll generally give you. It's just, he's kind of caught in the moment. He kind of has that it factor that a lot of other players don't have, particularly this young. And there's a lot of like all-star major leaguers that don't have that sort of game awareness. So I think that's what the separator is. And I think like looking back on it, coming at it from a more analytical standpoint, looking at the athletic testing as an amateur, I was less into the McGonigle profile. I hadn't seen McGonigle at that point. And Ben Badler, who's on our staff, who had seen a lot of Kevin McGonigle, I think probably really understood that he sort of had that element, that it factor, that of just understanding and awareness that, is not necessarily coachable or even natural for a lot of players.
As we said, as we're recording this, when I say that West Michigan is not an easy place to hit, like he does have, I think, a 600 slugging percentage at West Michigan, hitting like 283 there. On the road, Kevin McGonigle is hitting 451, 537, 46 in 16 games with 12 walks and 4 strikeouts. He has 4 homers on the road and 4 strikeouts. He's too good for that level. We expect to see him in Double-A before long. Actually, I'll be honest, I expect to see him in Double-A like any day. If you said like Kevin McGonigle is going up, I'd be like, yeah, that makes all kind of sense. He's ready for a higher level of challenge. The other thing that you hit on there when you talk about his athleticism, I remember writing him up the first year he was drafted for the Tigers, and he seemed at the time to fit kind of a profile the Tigers have kind of had, which is we want infielders who can hit, and if there's some defensive questions, we'll figure those out. And they've had a lot of guys, they've had success with those guys, but like if you said Colt Keith, and if you said Jace Young, and if you said even Justin Henry Malloy, who eventually moved to the outfield, they had a number of these guys who you would say, okay, I don't know where he's going to play defensively, but the guy's going to hit, and so we'll figure that out. Then with McGonigle, that was kind of like the perception coming out of high school was this like, I don't think he's going to be a shortstop long term, but he'll be able to play in the infield. He can really hit. And then every year we get better and better reports on his defense to where now, if you said, is he going to be a shortstop? It's like, yeah, there's a very realistic chance that he could be a big league shortstop. And if he's playing second base, he's probably going to be a plus or plus defender at second base. So like he's going to have defensive impact, not just be someone who, well, he can hit and that'll make up for his defensive questions. But that did not still end up being our next number one, because the more we talked about it, Geoff, the more we discussed it, there's a little pause here because like we know we're being a little aggressive here, but I would say that it's hard to say that there's almost been anyone in the minors this year that we've gotten more raves about when we talk to people, talk to scouts, talk to front offices who've seen him, front office officials. What's the case for Konnor Griffin? And I will say, to answer the question, why is he our number 2 prospect and our heir apparent? Pirate shortstop Konnor Griffin, shortstop / center fielder, I should say. But what is it about him that makes him the heir apparent to be our next number 1 prospect?
Yeah, I think it's just number 1. There's a few things. I think the first one is the athlete himself and the tools and the physicality and the explosiveness. They just jump off the field. Josh and I saw him in spring training. We both saw him multiple times. We saw him together once, and I think that video is up on our Instagram of him hitting like a triple, like a stand-up triple.
If you're on the YouTube channel, you're watching that as we're talking right now.
Exactly. And, I think you just see the ease. Now, the swing as an amateur didn't look like this. He put in some work in the off season. The Pirates were kind of involved with that as well. And he came into spring training, and we saw some videos in the off season, but I'm always skeptical of the training videos because they can isolate the best swing. They can isolate the best pitches. They can make anybody look pretty good.
And can I just add to that? And it's one thing if you're swinging in a laboratory environment, like, can you keep doing that when all of a sudden you're playing in front of the lights and the games count again? Or do you go back to what you did before?
Well, I can report that the swing looked really good in spring training and games. He got into a bunch of major league games, which I always think is a sign. Like if you want to read some tea leaves in terms of teams telling you stuff, usually the guys that are getting into big league games earlier than you expect in spring training are the guys that they have supreme confidence in. And it could be a guy as high profile as Konnor Griffin. It could be somebody like Victor Scott a few years ago that I think like, his quick rise to the major leagues was probably predicted a little bit by the amount of playing time he was getting in spring training.
I would say with that also, because what offense I think feel like happens with this is
Mhm.
that guy gets to come up for a game, and it's like, hey, okay, so step one is he doesn't seem overawed by this. Okay,
Mhm.
so that means that we can bring him back, because there are guys who sometimes, like early in their career, get sent out there for a game, and it's like, oh, he's just not ready for this. Okay, we won't bring him back again this year. And then I think step two is with the rare guys like a Connor Griffin. I think the big league staff is like, hey, can we get Konnor for another game? Is Griffin today on the roster? Because they want to see those guys, right?
Yeah.
And so they're essentially establishing themselves with the big league staff because they carry themselves well. They don't look overawed. And then, by the way, you saw this in spring training, Connor Griffin. He could just do things that there were literally no one else on the field, especially no one else on the Pirates, could do in some cases.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it. We saw him phenomenal throughout spring training in center field. He's played mostly shortstop, and I think if you watch the videos, he's rangy. He's got a huge arm. He's not always perfect out there, but I think if they wanted to stick him there long term and teach him the position, not that he necessarily needs to fully learn. He's played shortstop, but sort of hone that ability. I think he could be an above average shortstop defensively, maybe even better. But it feels a lot like a multi-time all-star MVP candidate sort of jumps off the page at you and just smacks you in the face type of stuff. And I think you then go beyond just all those physical attributes and just the eye test, and you look at the numbers. Since the beginning of the season, the more exposure he's gotten to professional competition, because I think that's something that needs to be discussed too. He saw, he was okay on the showcase circuit. Some people were underwhelmed. He didn't see a lot of high level competition in high school. So I think there were some growing pains there early on. The adjustment period is here, and it's been great. Since he's been up to high A, it's an 8.8% swinging strike rate. And regardless of the ballpark doesn't create or stop you from whiffing or hitting the ball.
And let's
that is
note, as you noted,
Greensboro, right?
3 series, only 1 in Greensboro, so 2 on the road. So this is not a Greensboro creation either.
Yeah, and the overall contact rates are there. He's kind of balancing the approach side of it, where it's not like it's a swing rate in the 30s, it's a swing rate in like the low to mid 40s. Those are all good qualities and characteristics to have when you're walking, at least so far in high A, and it's only been 17 games, 11% of the time. So the strikeouts have gone down. He's now well below 20% in terms of his strikeout rate. Not on the season,
17.2 since he got to high A.
but since he got to high A, and I think if we adjusted it and removed like that first 15 games in pro ball, it probably is below 20% for the season. The walk rates have continued to go up. So it's like at each point we've been like, oh, he's explosive. He's got power. He's got speed, can play multiple premium positions. Then the question mark was, yeah, but the contact is iffy and the approach is bad. And then it was, all right, the contact's gotten better. The end zone contact rate is, 16% or whatever it was over that first month. All right, he's got this and the contact. Yeah, but he's not walking. And then he sort of leveled up again, and now he's walking. And it's like, all right, what's the big question here? Because I don't know if I see any tool that I can put. I mean, I guess the hit tool you could put under a 60, but it feels like it's creeping toward a 60 over the last month and a half. The bigger sample screams to me that it is a 60. It's 70 power. It's 80 run. Depending on the position, it's either 55 or 60 at shortstop or 70 plus in the outfield with a 70 arm. This is a true 5-tool prospect when we talk about not just average tools across the board, but plus tools across the board. I think this is like the real deal. And it's crazy to think from where he's been in a year to now, where he was a top 10 pick, but like kind of a fringy top 10 pick because of these questions around the hit tool Will the power translate what the swing looks like? He's made such rapid development that that's also sort of a really good hint that there's some aptitude here as well to make adjustments and transition throughout the season on the fly. And we know that's a skill that you need as a big leaguer. And if you're going to be an all-star, you got to be able to make those adjustments and tweaks and get the most out of your skills. And he does. He gets the most out of his tools.
To add to what you said earlier, since May 1st, so take his first month out of it, it's an 18.6% strikeout rate. You know, he'd have a higher strikeout rate in April, kind of getting adjusted to full season ball. But since then, 18.6, which considering everything else, you would take 1,000 times out of 1,000. I think that the thing that reminds me, and I hesitate to bring this up because this is one of the most special athletes out there, but like what we're seeing progression wise, because he is used. I have heard this year, talking about this year's high school class, talking about high school shortstops in this class. And it used like, well, he's got a better hit tool than Konnor Griffin did. And it's like used as the example of a guy who there were real concerns about his hit tool coming out of high school. That was kind of like, that was the if with him. Like you said, maybe it's still not a 60, maybe it is. Coming out of high school, it was like, we know this guy can run. We know he's got power. We know he's an incredible athlete. We know he is going to be an impact defender somewhere. All these things, can throw, all that. But it was like, but if he can't hit, how much value is he going to have? And at this point in high A, it's really hard to say, like, again, we don't want to go overboard. He hasn't reached double A. He's not in the majors or anything like that. But he's made such strides with this that it's hard to say that what he did as a hitter in high school really has any relevance now, because he has shown the ability to make adjustments. But it does remind me a little bit of Elly De La Cruz, and how if you talk about when Elly kind of developed, it was every year he would figure out a way. Like there would be times where Elly De La Cruz would come to a new level and it would be like, oh, this is the level that's going to really eat him up because his strikeout rate's too much or whatever. And then Elly would figure it out, and then he would just be too good for the level, and then they would send him up. Griffin's kind of, again, like when we talk about, like you look at that first month in April in the Florida State League, and then you look at the second month and it's like, oh, he's unlocked a different level here. And then they move him up to high A. And by the way, I don't want to go overboard, but it is significant that he's in high A. We talk about him and Kevin McGonigle. Griffin is now, and again, McGonigle is going to move up soon, we think, but Griffin's at the same level as McGonigle is now. And he was from the draft after that. He could spend the second half of the year in Greensboro and be on a very fast track. But the key thing that you hit on, like the reason that we kind of kept moving him up and up and up as we're talking about this, is they're just like, if you yourself, as you hear this and you hear these, prospects, if you want safer, McGonigle's the safer option to be the next number one. Because at this point, it's really hard to believe that Kevin McGonigle, like the hit tool is the hardest tool to evaluate. The hit tool is obviously vital to everything else that you do, especially offensively. And Kevin McGonigle is one of the best pure hitters in the minor leagues. And he's doing it at a very young age and all that. But if you said, who has that, just kind of absurd combination of skills, potential skills and tools, that's what Konnor Griffin is, right? That's the guy who, if you said, I can't believe what I just saw, and then does that on a regular basis, right? Like if you said, like, again, please understand me, I'm not saying he's Bobby Witt Jr., but if you talk about, when we talked about Bobby Witt Jr. coming up, right? The question was, how good was the hit tool going to be? That was the question. No one ever had a question about his athleticism, about his speed, about his arm, about his, defense. There was some questions, but we always were pretty confident, like, no, he's going to be a really good defender long-term. The question was, okay, but there's some swing and miss here. Is he going to be a plus hitter? Well, yes. The answer is he's a 7, if not an 8 hitter, because Bobby Witt Jr. just kept stacking improvement on improvement on improvement. That's a little bit of the progression we're seeing so far. Now, the key thing that Bobby Witt Jr. did is he went to double A and he kept stacking improvement. And then But to go back to another thing you said, they show you when they play him in spring training. Like, remember that was the time of the pandemic and all, but like when they had that kind of abbreviated spring training in 2020, Bobby Witt Jr. was there for the Royals, and they just couldn't get him out of the lineup during that little abbreviated spring training because he was so good that they wanted him to play over and over and over. And they kind of came away from it, I think, thinking like, we're not going to bring him up right now, but maybe this is our best player right now, our best position player right now. Konnor Griffin, again, I'm not saying he's the Pirates' best player right now, but position player. But it wouldn't shock me if he got to that level pretty quickly. It's not exactly a lineup that's filled with, this is not the 27 Yankees we're talking about. Okay, we've talked a lot of really positive things about Konnor Griffin. We hit on the hit tool a little bit. Is there anything else here, Geoff, that we say like, okay, if we're looking back a year from now, we try to make sure when we do these players who ascend to number one, again, mid-season, I'm happy to say I can't really think of a whole lot. Roman Anthony did this last year, right before Roki Sasaki arrived. Again, we talked about James Wood did it the year before. Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holiday. We've thankfully been, I would say, like we've done a really solid job that when we put a guy as that new number one mid-season, we're not regretting it when the year is over. We're not regretting it 2 years later.
Mhm.
If there was something that we're going to look back on and regret on this one, what could it be? Is it maybe just that we're moving so fast for a guy who, as you just noted, has 3 series in high A?
Yeah, I mean, it could be that. It could be that there's struggles that show themselves again. But I started playing with some of the dates after you gave me the strikeout rate after the beginning of May. He's actually had a strikeout rate under 20% after the first 4 games of the season. So those first 3 games. So if you remove just the first 3 games, his strikeout rate is 20.1%. So those extra ticks on the actual season were more or less created in 3 games coming off of the complex, where I think he's punched out maybe like 11 times or something, 9 times in his first 3 games. So it's like there's just not a whole lot here. I think it would have to be a catastrophic injury,
Which is
or
always the caveat that you could just throw out that could always derail
sure,
anybody.
or it's the hit tool. But if I'm honest, there's just been so little to argue with the hit tool based on every single metric and number. And if that clump of strikeout games was in the middle of May and wasn't at the very beginning of the season, it may not have stuck with him so long, as goofy as that is to say. But initial impressions and when people are paying the most attention sometimes is the first few weeks of the season. So yeah, I guess it would be the hit tool. But I got to be honest, JJ, I really have a lot of confidence in this player and his ability to hit.
That's why he's our heir apparent to be our new number one. Here is our full updated top 5. And by the way, to answer the comment before it ever arrives, no, we're not putting our entire top 100 here. If you want that, go to baseballamerica.com. That's for Baseball America subscribers. Subscribers are what allow us to do what we do. We cannot do this. We cannot go and see all these players in person if not for the support of Baseball America subscribers. Before we run, I do want us to also hit on number 5 on this list because we haven't talked about him. I'm not saying we spent a whole lot of time. There's 2 people we're going to cover before we wrap up here. 2 pitchers. Jacob Mizorowski ascends to number 5 on this list. And I'll get it if you want to say, oh, great, you moved him up. We've had him pretty high. We've kept moving him up. He was already pretty high on our top 100. But at the same time, I would say that we would be stupid not to react to what we've seen. Like, I will tell you right now, the moment for me where I'm like, I am all in on Jacob Mizorowski was not his debut in the majors or that second start that was even better or that third start that was really good too. It was Nashville versus Memphis and watching him. I wrote about it that day. Like it was everything you're seeing in the majors we saw there. And the key thing I would say with this is credit Ben Badler again. We've kept him up there. Like, even though there's been a lot of walks, there's been a lot of like, is the breakthrough ever going to happen here? Even if the stuff is so great, or is this a reliever or whatever? And the thing that we started to see we've talked before. We'll talk about it again. The strike rate that was never 60% in any previous season, a sub 60% strike rate in the minors, it will derail you as a starter. You cannot start in the majors if you're not throwing 60%. Really, you want to be at 62, 63% strikes at least to succeed in the majors. Mizorowski went from 59%, 58% in past years to 64, 65% this year. But on top of that, the command that he added, where he's now throwing that 95 mile an hour slider right there, glove side on the edge of the zone over and over and over, locating fastballs at the edges of the zone, throwing that curve that basically then bites away, that kind of gives it a little bit of a different feel. He's pitching while also throwing 100, 100, 101, 102. I felt like at the end of the day, we had to kind of reflect the fact that if you're talking about all these pitching prospects, he is one that really does stand out. He is one that you kind of at the end of the day say, okay, that's the best pitching prospect in baseball. We know he will graduate, but he's number 5. The other one, though, that we should touch on before we go, Geoff, is our previous number 2 was Roki Sasaki. So Roki Sasaki took a tumble. He's at 37 on our new rankings. We're not giving up on Roki Sasaki. You've seen it in person. I will still say, watching him at his best in Japan, that's one of the best pitchers in the world, and not best future pitchers in the world, one of the best pitchers in the world. However, we also want to react to what we have seen. He's on the IL with the shoulder injury. It is something that we don't know when he's going to pitch again. And I would say more than that, though, Geoff, the other thing that stands out with that is because of that, we didn't see the fastball this year that we've seen before. And when you don't have that fastball, if you're Roki Sasaki, everything for him really does start. He has to have a swing and miss fastball that he can locate in the zone, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he doesn't have the ability to spin the baseball. And I think that's a big concern because it's like, where is the breaking ball going to come from? So it's not like when the fastball quality diminishes or he just doesn't have his best fastball on a given day that he has like 2 above average or better secondaries. He certainly has a plus secondary in the splitter. We saw that work. That there's no question about the quality of the splitter. That is a pitch that translated. But the issue is that's a pitch that needs to be set up by a fastball that is at least deceptive or well commanded. It kind of wasn't either of those things. Or there needs to be a breaking ball that sort of moves, glove side to sort of offset the splitter and the fastball. Kind of doesn't have that. I don't think it's done. I think that there's probably a splitter in the mix here with some of his power once he's fully healthy. And there's probably a better breaking ball shape, whether it's like a lower sort of spin cutter or something like that. But there needs to be some development in that sense.
That's where there's kind of like a big question here. And again, this is tough, right? Like, I know that some people may look at it and say, you had him as your number 1 prospect and now you're giving up on him. We're not giving up on him. But at the same time, when you compare him right now to a Chase Burns or a Kevin McGonigle or a Bubba Chandler and these guys who are at the top of our pitching prospect list, I can't tell you that, like, he's not healthy. They are. And I can't tell you that he has better stuff either. Like, again, Jacob Mizorowski's stuff, the only person I can equate it to as far as starting pitchers is peak Jacob deGrom. Like, it's that level of stuff. I know Chase Burns, as we're recording this, had an outing to forget in Fenway, but Chase Burns' stuff is really good. Bubba Chandler has had a little bit of a struggle in June, but his stuff is really good. The guys at the top of this list have that. They're upper level pitchers who are healthy and who have really elite level stuff. And we just can't say that Roki Sasaki this year, and he's been battling adjustments, but also this injury that has ended him on the IL. We can't say, hey, we know without a question, without a doubt that we're going to get back to seeing the Roki Sasaki that we saw a couple of years ago. Because do remember, the other thing is we've added further information here is Roki Sasaki himself was concerned when he was doing his tour What he wanted everyone to tell him is where did my velocity go and how can you help me get it back? And we saw it for like an adrenaline fueled blip in Japan. But that's really the only time that we've seen that truly elite level velocity. And to kind of go what Geoff said, with him, he needs that more than many because everything is off. If he's on, it is fastball that can dominate in the zone and then the splitter that can dominate out of the zone off of the fastball. But if you don't have to fear that fastball, the plan doesn't work. So we think he can get back there. But we did want to talk about and explain further why it is that he has taken such a tumble in our rankings. And yes, by the way, I will add the other thing. Our prospect rankings, we do it off of innings or at bats. Those rookie, we don't do it off of service time. Again, maybe one day we'll change that, but the problem we run into is service time remains a very tricky calculus, and we start rolling out our next year rankings right after the season ends. I keep working on it, but until I can have a comfortable, like we have official service time for all these players, which ones are rookies, which ones are not, that we can have in October for we're not going to do it because the last thing we want to do is roll out, oh, here's our top 10. And it's like, wait, by the way, that wasn't 44 service days. That was 46 because there was a 2-day span here where I know we sent him down, but ended up being rescinded because he came back up or whatever, where those things can happen. We're not going to do this where we come back and say, I'm sorry, our number 6 prospect in that system is no longer eligible. So until we can, we go off of innings and we go off of at-bats, and Roki Sasaki does not have enough innings yet to have graduated, even if he's logging the service time, even while he's on the IL. But Geoff, again, this is fun. This is what we do. We love we love analyzing the rankings. We just wrapped up earlier today, a pretty mammoth top 100 meeting, but and now we get to go turn the page and go to working on our updated top 30s, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's where the effort goes. And we get the draft looming as well. So there's always some additional work for the whole team on that side. So yeah, busy times, but good stuff.
But well, for Geoff, I'm JJ. We thank you again for watching this Baseball America Prospect podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you're subscribed. Click that bell so you see a notification every time we have a new one. If you're on the podcast feed, thank you for subscribing on the podcast. We have a ton of podcasts. We try to keep them on a pretty regular schedule now, something we used to not be the case, we could say. But now we've got, if you are interested in the draft, if you are interested in prospects, if you are interested in fantasy baseball, all over on the Baseball America prospect feed. And obviously check out baseballamerica.com. If you love this, I promise you there will be more there that you could possibly consume. We have updated top 100 prospect rankings up at the site right now. But in top of that, we're coming out with updated top 30s again, which we just updated the team top 30s last month. We're doing it again. We have 500 updated draft rankings for top 500 prospects for this year's draft, with reports for all 500. We are updating those reports. So some of those are still, but we have reports on those for all 500 players, for the top 500 players for the draft, which, by the way, they only draft a little over 600 now. So we're getting close to having them all kind of, and we will, by the way, as Geoff said, when it's over, we will have reports for everyone in the top 10 rounds, plus many that go the 11 through 20 rounds as well. That's all at baseballamerica.com. For Geoff, I'm JJ. So long, everybody.